So this is a horse that has a quarter crack on the lateral side of this left front foot. He got this quarter crack, he actually sprung a shoe and no one noticed, and he was jumping on a kickstand. He's a jumper, so they were like 4-3 fences when the indoor was frozen. That's how that happened, which beginning of April, and it's about 6 weeks. So the crack is just starting to grow down from the coronary band. I find a lot of times it takes one full shoeing before you start to get good growth out from the coronary band. If you look here on his foot, we have a heart bar with a leather rim pad, toe clips, so the clips are away from the area of the quarter. And you can kind of see right here, the foot is unweighted, basically from about here. So the last bit of the heel at the base of the frog is actually weighted, and then from there forward to directly kind of in line. The crack actually never fully broke through the bottom of the hoof wall, which is a little bit of an issue, but you can see in the white line there's separation. This whole piece here is actually loose, and you can't really appreciate any movement now because he's it hasn't bled in since the initial episode 6 weeks ago. We're going to patch this, and I'm just going to go over kind of how I patch. The reason that this area is not unweighted is because they're going to actually jump this horse, or the hope is that they're going to be jumping this horse with the crack here. I'd prefer not to be patching it until I have about a 1/4 inch growth down. But when he's jumping a 4-3, 4-6 fence, to think that this last bit of his foot here is going to stay unweighted on a horse that probably weighs 1,400 pounds is unrealistic. While we were making the segment on the quarter cracks, we came across a horse just as we were working today that perfectly illustrates a heel that was weighted and a crack that grew down. This goes a little bit against what a lot of people teach, but it makes sense if you think about it, and hopefully this horse will, looking at this horse's foot, you'll have a better understanding of why maybe this does in fact work. Shoeing subsequent to the heel grab, during the shoeing he had started a small quarter crack here, so we reshot him. We just put a bar shoe and a rim pad, but you can, in our segment on quarter cracks, we talked about how, we don't unweight the very rearward portion of the foot behind the crack, and right here you can actually see all the good growth coming down, and now this area right here is actually bearing weight, but during this whole process this area was never completely unweighted. All I did was remove a little bit of foot at the bottom, so that's a good example of verification that we really don't need to unweight the most caudal portion of the heel in order to get a crack to start to grow down. Because you can see this horse's conformation, he bears quite a lot of weight on the inside of that foot, and he is an upper level event horse. Now we're going to get down to patching. First thing I do is I clean the area of the crack out with a small loop knife, cutting only kind of in a downward fashion, and I like for that to be like relatively clean. And then I go ahead and take Dremel tool with a diamond burr, and I use that just to kind of roughen up and I actually will get that in there. I don't remove a lot of hook there, just enough so that I can get okay, then over here, then I take small little bit of, this is very kind of unscientific, but rather than using a drain, I just want that area to be open, okay? And the simplest
This is the simplest method I've found to make sure this whole area stays open, and I'm pretty like precise with my glue, because we don't want to be, where I see people have a lot of trouble with this is when they go ahead and patch over a crack. So a couple of the reasons for cleaning it out are make sure we don't have any sort of hang nails or like additional areas of stress, and then the probably biggest reason is to make sure there's no fresh blood. Fresh blood and a glue patch equals disaster, like abscessing. I see guys do like gorgeous job patching, lacing, screwing, whatever the crack, and then they have an issue with that. I use a fabric called Cobra Socks, or that's like the trademark for it. But what it basically is it's carbon fiber and Kevlar kind of mixed together. And the reason I use that is because once this stuff dries with the glue in there, I wet it. I cut it to shape, I wet it, and then when it dries, it's hard, rigid, but not too rigid. It's about the same rigidity to maybe slightly more rigid than hoof wall. One of the other issues that you'll see with patching is you'll see people, they get, they make too sturdy of a patch, and that's like, you know, when you have a worn out pair of jeans and your mom puts a great patch on them, and then they go ahead and rip wherever the end of the patch is. So we don't end up with 2 quarter cracks. Then I just kind of lay this over there like that. Add a little more glue over the top of it. So just kind of cover the whole thing with glue, and then I cover that with plastic, and then I just kind of feather the edge with my finger like this, and it's kind of a no rasp finish. And I think it's pretty important to like smooth all this. All right. I just use the welding rod to completely clean that area out. Small loop knife, clean up the area where the patch is, and then when you do the method with the plastic, there's very little cleanup that you need to do. Rasping fabric, it just ends up being a frayed mess. So that's it. That's the finished product. You can see it, you can access it, you can treat it if you want to, but hopefully it stays dry, and none of that's necessary. The reasons to use it are that you know, you don't. You can trim it right out. You can unweight it just like you would foot. It's the same consistency as foot, which is one of the reasons why I think it works reasonably well. And then last thing is you're not cutting and poking your fingers with wire ends, which seems like whenever I used to lace them, that seemed to be always a little bit of an issue. Certainly there are times to lace, but I find if I get things mechanically correct, this method works pretty well.